welcome to this episode of The Martial Truth. What if? But before we get on with that, let's do a couple of things here. Very close to 15,000 subscribers. Appreciate all of you. I'm looking forward to hitting that number. Hopefully it'll adjust the algorithm a little bit and get the videos out there to a wider audience. So please, if you're not a subscriber and you're watching this, please click that like, share, and subscribe. It really helps. Consider becoming a monthly member. We're up to about 130 monthly members, which is great. More stuff will be coming down the pike. Did want to mention I will be in Okinawa for 10 days, so there won't be a lot going up over that time. There'll be a couple of videos dropping, but obviously I'm not going to have a chance to get a lot of stuff up while I'm over there in Okinawa. I hope to be filming some things when I'm over there, so that should be good. Get that on the channel when I get back. All right. Appreciate anybody that watched the episode of the Punch, Kick, Choke Chat podcast last week. That group of guys, very nice guys, they had me on and interviewed me for about an hour and a half. You can go to their channel and check that out if you'd like. I had a really good time, and again, like I appreciate it. Got a lot of positive feedback from that. So thanks again to those guys for having me on. I will be in New York in January 22nd to 27th. I'll put the contact details in the description if you want to contact James Waller to see what I'm teaching. Obviously, it'd be a lot of Ishinryu, a lot of Chen style Taijiquan practical method, but I'll also be teaching some Mariyoshi and maybe some other things. So you can reach out for him. He'll know the schedule and what the plan is. All right. So, what if? Okay, so what if? What am I talking about? All right, well, let's talk about some self-defense training. All right, so, I'm very into self-defense. I think karate and any martial art is first and foremost a martial art, okay? So I try to practice it like a martial art. So even in martial arts like Sosu Ishido Jiu-Jitsu and Katori Shinto-ryu that have two-man kata that are obviously prearranged, if I'm working with a partner, as he goes up in ability, well, my attacks become more real. So I'm literally trying to cut him with the sword, or I'm trying to do my technique on him in jiu-jitsu, and it's up to him to counter it properly. So yeah, in the beginning, it's just choreography. You're just walking through because you're memorizing the techniques, you're memorizing the movements. But then eventually, there's got to be a little bit of pressure testing going on, okay? Within reason. We don't want people going to hospital getting injured, but there's got to be an element of danger. So like in self-defense training, I show a technique. And so let's take the most basic technique, a wrist grab, okay? Guy grabs your wrist, you want to get out. You show numerous techniques. Now, obviously, why do I have to let him grab my wrist? So common sense would dictate that, and this is one of my beliefs is, well, people say, well, just don't let him grab you in that. Okay, that's great. What if he grabs you in that? In other words, what if you're in the hold? Now you've never worked on getting out of the hold if you get put in it. So in the beginning, I teach how to get out of all the various holds, and it runs a crazy gamut of techniques. High bear hug, medium, low bear hug, half Nelson, full Nelson, lapel grabs, chokes, hair pulls, wrist grab, middle of the arm grab, sleeve grab, shoulder grab. And it's just headlocks. It just goes on and on. Then all the weapons work against the knife, gun, club, bat, chain, right? Fighting on the floor, fighting against the wall, sitting in the chair and fighting. So runs a crazy gamut. And again, I don't spend a lot of time on certain ones, but I still go through them to give people an opportunity. So now, throughout the years, what I've noticed is, and this will definitely happen at seminars. I've had it happen at several seminars, which is I show a technique, and someone will walk over to me and say, hey, sensei, it's not working. Every time I go to do it, he's doing this. And I go, well, okay, show me, right? And they do it. And I tell the guy who's countering the technique, I say, oh, all right, do that with me. And when he goes to do that with me, I usually hit him. Okay? Or I do another technique that hurts a little bit. And then I stop the seminar and I say, all right, we've had our first situation of what if? What if? Okay. So I show a technique. I show you the counter to the technique, right? So I show you, you attack me with your technique, and then I show you the counter to that. So now you know what I'm going to do. So let that sink in. It's training. Of course you know what I'm going to do. So this is one of the huge problems in martial arts training, is training partners. We have a saying in the dojo to training partners, okay, don't be an asshole. What do we mean by that? Well, exactly this kind of thing. And this runs the gamut. It runs the gamut in jiu-jitsu, karate, tai chi, kung fu, weapons training. It runs the gamut. Okay. So I stop the seminar and I say, okay, so what if? So I just showed you a technique. You showed me to an attack. And now some of you are starting to counter the technique I showed. And why are you doing that? Well, you're doing that because you know what I'm going to do. So then sometimes I'll get the guy who says, I say, all right, I stop and I say, all right, attack me. And it's funny, the guy almost always asks, how? And my response is, any way you'd like. And then sometimes the guy will go, well, what are you going to do? Anything I like. But I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. Good luck. And then the light bulb starts to go off. So obviously, if you know what I'm going to do, it's very easy to counter it. But when we train with each other, the person that's the attacker is supposed to have the attacker mindset, the criminal mindset, the predator mindset, which is the predator thinks you're not going to be able to do anything against them. When I grab this guy in a bear hug, I got him. Now my friend's going to be able to rifle his pockets, take whatever we want, right? I grab him in that rear choke, bend him backwards. He's not going to be able to get out. The predator has no idea that you have any type of training. I mean, he shouldn't, unless for some reason you did the most dumbest possible thing you can do on the planet, which is somehow alerted him to the fact that you have training in martial arts or anything else, boxing, any type of fighting discipline. You never, ever want to telegraph that fact to your opponents, okay? Do you think I ever got in a karate kamae when I was facing a criminal who squared off with me? No, honestly, most of the time I left my hands down by my side. Why did I do that? Because I was pretty sure he was going to try to punch me in the face, because criminals love to try to punch you in the face. Everybody's a headhunter. It's one of the most common attacks. It's the most common attack in the world, a punch to the face. And if I keep my hands down, he's going to try to punch me in the face. And I kind of know then that he's going to try to punch me in the face, and it makes it easy to deal with the attack. So when the guy went to punch me in the face, he never countered that, because he expected to punch me in the face. The 50 previous people he'd thrown a punch at as a criminal and punched them in the face, the punch landed. Okay, well, guess what? Now it didn't land. So now his brain is screaming, danger, danger, and I've already eliminated him as a threat. So, did I have instances where I went to do a technique and a guy countered it? Absolutely. I tried to put him in a joint lock. He pulled his arm a certain way. Maybe he went down on the ground, fell to the ground, and maybe just spun out of it. Maybe he spun into it. Whatever, okay? Did he do some fancy counter? No. Never had a predator, never had a criminal try any type of fancy counter on me. That only takes place in martial arts classes. And don't get me wrong, if you want to work on that stuff as an exercise, I'm all for it. Because again, it can open the door to some interesting training practices, okay? But the thing to remember is, okay? Criminals are not going to counter you with some fancy technique. They're just not, because they don't know any fancy techniques, right? Their violence is good because they're used to violence and they've worked at violence a lot, and they've removed all the barriers in their mind for using violence. They have no problems using violence. They like it. They like hurting people. It gives them a sense of power and superiority. They like it. Don't think they don't. They like it. Okay? So, in the dojo, or at a seminar, and the guy says, well, if you did that, I would do this. Okay. Now we begin to go down the rabbit hole. So the new instructor will then go, well, if you did that, I would counter with this. And then the guy responds, well, if you countered with that, then I would do this. And now you're in the rabbit hole. You're going someplace that you're never, ever going to go to in a real life self-defense situation. Ever. Okay? I would say the most techniques I had to use on a person before I got them into a position where I could handcuff them, where they were totally immobilized, I had them, would be 3. Went after one, didn't work. Countered with a second, didn't work. Then boom, by the 3rd I got him. Later on, as I became more proficient, because I was doing it so often against resisting opponents in real situations, pretty much the first technique I did worked. I mean, because I figured it out. It's like anything else, But the idea that you're going to what if an instructor to death, and any instructor that allows that to fall into that trap is a huge problem, okay? And what happens is you start to waste time. And it's not realistic. It's not what actually goes on in real self-defense situations. So, if you're doing a Jiu Kumite type sparring in the dojo, yeah, of course, you're going to work techniques where if he does that, you want to do this, okay? And, and you might work, like we do techniques here, where you go to do the technique and I have the person resist a certain way, and then you have to counter that resistance. Why do I do that? Because I have them resist the way I saw that people out there resisted. Not with the fancy counter, not with this, not with that. Specific ways that I noticed criminals responded and countered and resisted. So what I try to do is show people, okay, well, there's a chance he may do this. If he does this, this is one way you can follow up. So I will do that sometimes. But again, I'm telling the training partner how I want him to resist. Okay? This way he knows how to resist. And the reason I'm telling him that is because, well, I tried this technique. I did this technique multiple times on criminals, and this is how I found they resisted. A couple of times a guy resisted like this. A couple of times a guy resisted like that. So let's work that, because we know from experience that this is a couple of ways they'll resist. Now, notice I'm not saying they're trying to counter you, although they are. Through the resistance, they're trying to not allow you to do your technique. So it is a form of counter. It's not a fancy counter. It's not a martial arts counter, okay? Never saw a criminal that tried to do any kind of martial counter. It always was, the guy's trying to put me in an arm bar, I'm going to fight it by resisting like this. The guy's trying to put me in a wrist lock, I'm going to fight it by doing like this. The guy's throwing a punch at me, I'm going to try not to get hit by moving my head like this, by covering my body like this. So these are the things I try to show the students. I'll give you an example. I used to seize the throat a lot, seize it and squeeze to gain control of the criminal. Often followed up with an Osoda Gari, like a foot sweep, take him to the ground, roll him over, handcuff him. I would say 99% of the time when I seize the criminal's throat, he immediately grabbed my wrist. 99% of the time. Okay? If I grabbed his groin, he grabbed my wrist. He tried to grab my hand. Okay? Now think about it. Is that a common sense reaction? The answer is 100% it is. Okay? It's not a fancy counter. What's he doing? Well, the hand is what's hurting me. I'm going to grab the hand and try to pull it off, right? If you get a good enough grip, it's very hard for them to pull it off. And if you squeeze behind the esophagus, it feels like their esophagus is coming with the hand. So usually they stop doing that, all right? And if you press up underneath here, there's 2 pressure points here. If you push up and push the head back, very hard for them to get any leverage to pull your hand down. Just some simple self-defense tips. So may I show that in class where I have my students seize the throat and have the attacker grab the wrist and try to pull a hand off? Absolutely, right? Because again, I've told you this is something that I've seen 99% of the times. And I've grabbed the throat a lot in combat, okay? A lot, all right? So again, avoid falling into the trap of the what if. Normally what I say at a seminar when it starts going down this rabbit hole, and I have to stop the seminar and say, okay, folks, there's a lot of what ifs going on in the room. Well, if you did that, I would just do this, sensei. Okay. And then I usually go something like, well, what if Captain America walked in right now and threw his mighty shield at us? And then usually I get a bunch of chuckles. And I go, right, Captain America's not going to do that because Captain America isn't real, right? Well, you guys, a lot of you guys in this room seem to think you're psychic, like you can predict the future. So that when you're grabbing me, the criminal grabs me, and he knows, oh, he's going to do a technique on me. He's going to do some joint lock on me. So I got to be ready to counter that, right? And again, you start to realize, okay, well, right. How am I supposed to know he's going to do a joint lock? Like, you got to take a step back as the training partner and realize your sole function here is to pretend to be the criminal, to pretend to be the predator, okay? You're not there to, when your partner goes to do his technique, well, if you did that, I would counter that with this. Oh, okay. And again, if my aunt had balls, she'd be my uncle. But my aunt doesn't have balls. She's my aunt, okay? So again, martial artists, get your head out of your butt and realize how to train properly. And how to train properly is the guy that's pretending to be the attacker in your class, at your seminar, he has to have the criminal mindset, which is, oh, I'm not a martial artist. I'm just a criminal that's good at violence. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to attack you with my violence. So when I grab your wrist, I'm going to grab that wrist and try to yank you. I'm going to grab your lapels and try to pull you in and control you. I'm going to throw that haymaker at your head and try to take your head off, okay? That's the only thing he can do. He has no idea what your response is going to be in an actual combat situation. But in the seminar, in the dojo, yes, he knows what the response is going to be because I just showed the technique. So, of course, it's easy for him to counter it. Duh, right? But again, I see this all the time. And I see instructors allow themselves to get dragged into these nonsense discussions about, well, I would counter with this. Well, if you did this, then I'd do that. Well, then if you did that. It's utterly ridiculous. It's a total waste of time. Don't allow yourself to get drawn into this. Explain to the students clearly why this is nonsense. It's a waste of time. Okay? We don't have that much time to train. Look, in modern times, right? You know, when I started, class was 2 hours. My classes are all an hour long. All right? Everybody has jobs. Everybody's busy like crazy. Okay? And a guy like me, I'm teaching several martial arts. So I have a lot of 1 hour classes, and a lot of people do more than one art. So they're here 2 hours a night, 2 hours a day, 2 hours a night. Okay. They're getting a lot of practice, right? But it's never enough, right? We all know that. I mean, I train every day. It's not enough, right? We got to get an 8th day, right? So I can train 8 days a week instead of 7. It's not happening. I do the best I can, right? We all do the best we can. So in the training time we have, we want to make sure we're using that training time as best as possible. Okay? Now, if you're a sport martial artist, then most of the stuff I'm talking about is nonsense. And again, if you're a sport martial artist, like doing grappling, where you're on the floor and you're trying to do a technique to the guy, and you're going to show the guy how to counter that technique, we're talking a very, very different situation. Okay, but as I said on a podcast, in my fighting experience, yeah, it goes to the ground when I put the bad guy there. When I put him there because he's unconscious, or I put him there because he's in an arm bar and now I'm putting him in a position to handcuff, right? Or I threw him to the ground and slammed him into the ground, right? But I'm not on the ground rolling around with him. No way. No way. Okay? Might be more than one guy. Okay? I'm not putting myself in that position. I'm putting him on the ground. So that's when the fight goes to the ground, when I put the bad guy there. When I put the predator there, okay? So don't allow yourself to fall into this trap. It's important to avoid the what-if scenario. There are occasions when a what-if question is a totally legit question. Maybe I'm showing against a haymaker, and we're working the technique against this big looping punch. And then the student says to me, well, Sensei, what if the guy threw a straighter punch? Would the same technique work? Totally legit what-if question. Totally legit. Very different. Well, Sensei, I know we're doing this technique when he's grabbing me with his right hand. But what if he grabbed me with his left hand? Would the same technique work? Legitimate what-if question. Well, Sensei, if you did that, I would just counter you with this. Now we're getting into the realm of nonsense, okay? Because again, how do you know what I'm going to do? You don't know what I'm going to do. You don't. It's not like Billy Jack. I'm not going to stand in front of the guy and go, I'm going to take my right foot and I'm going to hit you on this side of your face with my right foot. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Like, why would I do that? Now, again, I think it's cool as shit when Billy Jack kicks him in the face. I mean, again, right, cool. But I also understand it's a movie. It's not real. You'd never do that. Duh. Okay? So the common sense is work the techniques in a way where the students are getting benefit out of it. So the attacker's job when he's the attacker is to be a good attacker. And you have to teach people how to attack. And if you don't know, again, million of real fighting videos out there. Watch them, okay? Again, the attacker doesn't know you know anything, okay? That's the mindset you have to have as the attacker in the dojo, It's the same thing in Tai Chi. A lot of Tai Chi people are very bad training partners. We tell them to be in a certain position, and they go mush. They go limp, okay? And then the technique doesn't work. And of course it doesn't. Eventually, you could do whatever you want, the technique's going to work. But when you're first learning it, the training partner has to be a little bit more cooperative. His job is for you to work your technique in the way it's going to work for you, okay? And then when you switch, now it's your turn to be a good training partner. So, you're training together, two people. Each one of you are getting a turn to be that training partner, to be the attacker, to be the pretend predator. Okay, do it right. Don't be that guy. You're always going to fully resist when he goes to do the technique. Okay, how did you know he was going to do that technique? Okay, I just flicked my fingers in your eye. You're still resisting. Okay, I guess I'll flick my fingers for real in your eye. I can guarantee you're not going to resist. And chances are, when I flick my fingers in your eye, you're going to let go. Okay? So, this topic came up the other day. I thought it'd be good for a podcast. All right? I've got a couple of interviews coming up. Okay? Hopefully get Scott Fawcett in the near future. Just wrote a book on Ishinru. And I'm interviewing Sensei Bruce Heilman from Okinawan Kempo and Okinawan Kobudo the day Monday after Thanksgiving. So that should be good. Look forward to talking to Bruce. Great guy, super nice guy. All right. Remember, seminar in New York, okay, end of January. I'll put the details in there. Please click that like, share, subscribe button. Consider becoming a member. Appreciate all of you. This wouldn't work if I didn't have you guys that were giving me the support. Hope you like this one, and I'll see you in the next podcast. Take care.